Hello, I'm Mike Parrish, Agriculture Extension Agent in Dinwiddie County, and I'm for the soil because it's the foundation to everything in agriculture.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of For the Soil, a Conversation. I'm Jeff Ishii, and my co-host Dr. Eric Benfelt with Virginia Cooperative Extension will be joining us in just a few moments. Mary Sketch Bryant took the week off, and very busy lady Mary is, and we will welcome her back in a future episode. Our special guest this week is an international guest. She is from southeastern Africa, and that's exactly where we had this conversation with Taona Chigwenembe of Malawi. And she's with an environmental group there in Southeast Africa that is looking to improve the soil health of their own region. I think you'll enjoy this conversation. Let's now go to part 2 of this conversation with Taona Chigwenembe of Malawi. Dr. Eric Benfelt with Virginia Cooperative Extension Community Viability continues our conversation with Taona Chigwenembe of Malawi.
Taona, you had mentioned how sort of influential your mother was and very resilient and also quite the teacher and example for you. I don't know if you'd like to speak a little bit more about that.
Oh, yeah. So growing up, I grew up with a mother who was, she's very bright, vibrant. She's a teacher by profession, and she just worked hard. She made sure that we did not lack anything. We had food on the table, we had clothes on our back, and nobody would ever notice where we were coming from. But she was doing pretty much all that. So when she comes from school, she would come home and cook some samosas, make a couple of cakes, a couple of food stuff that she would go back and sell at school to her students when she was teaching on a break. Then she would sell them the snacks just so she'd be able to support and made everything available for us and make sure that we access education and we did not lack anything. For me, that was very inspiring. And not only that, she taught me how to grow food because she would have livestock around. She made sure that she's growing, all the vegetables around the house, the fruit trees. Our home was very abundant because she made sure that we had all that. So growing up, I was very, very inspired by my mom and the work that she was doing. There was no end to her work, and she just wanted to make sure that our family was supported. We had everything that we needed, and as girls too, and that we would be able to dream bigger and become more in this life. So that she inspired me a lot. She still does up to now. And I think when I grew up after graduating from college, I met a couple of other women in the villages. These are women in poor communities. They do not have access to water, access to education, access to, there are no hospitals around. They're just in poor and hard to reach areas. But they are hardworking women as well. And, they're doing pretty much the same thing my mom does. And that just is very inspiring. They wake up, in the morning, go out in the fields, make sure they're growing food for their family, come back, with vegetables, legumes, and whatever food that they're able to harvest that time, and feed their entire family. Even their husbands are truly relying on these women. So these are incredible women that I feel like they need the support all the support that we can give them, because they work hard, they supply, food for their families. They are pretty much taking care of the villages. They're not really recognized. Their work is not really recognized. But the contribution that they give, to the family, to the villages, to the country is very, very important to be recognized.
Taona, you talked in the previous episode about the people of Malawi growing their own food because they don't have the convenience of grocery stores and so forth like we do here in the United States. I'd like for you to talk a little bit more about gardening, or what we would call backyard gardening here in the United States. And I presume there in Malawi, it is subsistence gardening. It is for your food. Talk about some of the practices in the the typical garden, if you will. For instance, do people in Malawi, do they use compost? Do they use cover crops? Do they test their soil every once in a while? Can you talk about some of the, maybe use raised beds, some of the techniques?
Okay. So we have raised beds, and we also use box ridges, the big box ridges, and a lot of these gardens. Most people would want to have these gardens closer to a water body, so that they can easily water and irrigate the crops. So I think I did not mention that the communities that we work with are along the big Shure River in Malawi, and this river is infested with a lot of crocodiles and hippos. So it's hard for poor communities to just go there with their buckets. They can't draw water from there with their buckets. You need irrigation equipment to be able to do that. So it's a big water body that most people can't have access to because it's a danger. It has a lot of crocodiles. But then you find that people still go out there and dig out a well close by, so that they're able to draw water from there and water their gardens and to be able to grow food. Partly also because this is a drier area, and with the threats of flooding every year, so most homes are built very far from the gardens. So you'd have to walk from home to the garden just to be able to grow food, because you want your garden to be closer to the water, but you don't want to build your house closer to the water, because once it's flooding, it means your home is gone as well. So most homes are far. Most people have to walk like 30 minutes walk to get to their gardens so that they can grow food and take care of the gardens. But because it's a community gardens and people, it's such a safe place and everyone takes care of everyone, And if you've got manure, like from your livestock, you're able to share with your neighbor and, build some more compost manure. You can do that and apply to the soils so that you can be able to grow more food, make your soil more healthy. So it's usually using manures from the livestock, simply composting, and sometimes it's using the right cover crops as well. A lot of legumes that we use in Malawi, some of them, they're nitrogen fixers, and they're able to support, I think, the soil and to be able to bring more nutrients to the soil. We have trees that we also encourage to be planted in the gardens. There's the Fidabia tree, and we also have the Glycidia tree. And these are like great manure for the soil. If you plant them, and you're practicing chop and drop every time, like chopping and dropping, mostly the Glycidia, and you're dropping the leaves on top of the soil, you're covering the soil with the leaves. It just brings a lot of nutrients to your soil. It makes it even more healthy. It makes it easy for you to grow food on that soil. So it's about introducing the right trees to plant in your garden, putting the right cover crops as well, rotational planting as well. So if you planted a couple of beans here, you'd have to rotate a couple of times, but also diversity in the garden. You're making sure that you're introducing crops that maybe they might be prone to some, to some pests, but these might resist that pest. So combining different varieties of crops on your land so that you'll be able to have a variety. At the end of the day, when you're looking at the harvest, you're not harvesting just one thing, but you're harvesting a couple of other things. And that also improves and boosts nutrition in the families as well.
Taona.
So most of these gardens are also under trees. So we're also promoting agroforestry systems. So pretty much strong agroforestry systems that we're implementing.
Taona, if you could speak also about the importance of water conservation. My wife, Mary, and I, we lived along Lake Victoria as well as in a town, and we relied a lot on rainwater for all of our household needs, as well as, if we would have a garden. What is needed there in Malawi as far as water conservation?
Water is very important in our areas. Malawi, 80% of our country is dependent on rain-fed agriculture. So if you do not grow your food during the rainy season, it becomes very hard for you to grow food any time of the year. So knowing when to grow the food, and I think the changes in the weather patterns have made it very difficult for most people now. It's hard to predict when you're getting, enough rains, when can you grow this? So most people are just waiting and seeing, what it will be like in that year. So whenever it rains, it's very important to save as much water as you can. Find ways to save that water so that you use the same water to grow food, I think, for a longer period before it gets totally dry and it's hard for you to grow food. So just conserving that water, I think, to prolong the growing season, it's very important. But not only that, also for the homes and use of water in our homes as well. It's very important. So most people do not have access to running water. They would have to walk to a close by borehole to be able to draw water and take it back home. So that also kind of affects the lifestyle that most people live. It takes more time from gardening, more time from other, responsibilities, because they have to make sure that they have water at home as well. Yeah. So it's very important to conserve water, more especially when you're living in a savanna area where it's dry for 220 days in a year. You want to make sure that whatever water you have keeps you for a longer period.
Eric, any further questions?
Taona, if you could, I know women's education, girls' education is also very important in addressing these environmental challenges. If you could speak a little bit about I think it's Girl in a Bike program. Now, I know when I was in high school, Taona, our house they would provide a bus if you were 2 miles from the school. Our house was like 1.95 miles from our high school. So I had to walk to school just about every day. And I sort of lamented that, but it was good exercise. But what is the situation there in Malawi with the girls' education and the Girl in a Bike program?
Okay. So a Girl on the Bike program is a program that was introduced to support the girls from the rural communities, girls that were not able to commute to school easily because of the challenges that most schools are very far from homes. So a lot of girls would have to walk for 10 to 30 miles just to get to school, and that's just one way. And then they have to walk back, and it becomes very dangerous for the girls because one is too far, two, the things that they might meet along the way, and it was very dangerous for most of these girls. And sometimes they'd have to cross rivers, big rivers, just to get to their school. So a Girl on a Bike project was introduced as projects that support girls with bikes so that they're able to ride their bikes and to get to school easily and in time. Somebody would have to wake up at 4 a.m. just to be in class at 8 a.m. So you'd imagine the productivity of that child when they are in class after having that long walk, and they would have to think about another long walk back home. So that was kind of affecting the education for the girls in the areas. Most parents would not let the girls go to school because it's too far, number one. Two, girls have to wake up early in the morning already to go draw water from a well, bring water to the home, to support the homes, which makes it even more difficult for the girl. It now means she has to wake up at maybe 3 a.m. so that she's able to do her chores at home just to start off for school at 4 a.m. So this project was basically introduced to support these girls, but it was inspired after looking at all the statistics and knowing that educating girls is another solution to climate change. So if we're educating these girls and supporting girls' education in our area, we would have more champions, more ambassadors rising from this community, and they'll be able to make a lot more difference in the community that they are in. So we started with bikes, and then later on we started with even constructing hostels for the girls that were living even further, distances that even bikes could not cover in a day. So we built hostels for those girls as well. So right now we have educated over 500 girls through our project. And currently we have 250 girls that we are supporting with scholarships, bicycles, just making sure that these girls are staying in school. Yeah. And it is also something that keeps them away from early marriages, because if they are home with the impact of climate change and the thing that parents can't produce food, as well as they used to do, so they would want to marry the girls off, so that they do not have responsibility for feeding more family members in the home. So girls as young as 12 would be married off. So this program has also helped us to keep more girls in school, just making sure that they are not married off, and we're reducing also early marriages in the community.
We've been talking today with Taona Chigwenembe of Malawi. And Taona, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the program. I just pulled up your website, and I wanted to make sure that our listeners were aware. You can do a search for the term Creative Solutions for the Environment. The web address is csemw.org, and your mission statement is to preserve the environment through organizing, educating, and empowering rural communities to reforest, build resilience, create alternative livelihoods, and reduce poverty as we transition to a more eco-friendly and sustainable way of life. And I know that our listeners would certainly want to support your efforts. Once again, that web address is csemw.org. That is Creative Solutions for the Environment in Taona. Any final words for our listeners?
Thank you so much, Dave. My last words would be, you can make a difference wherever you are. You can plant a tree. You can, make sure you're keeping trees alive. There's some practices that we have to do away with, just so that we are keeping our environment better, and also we're reducing our footprint, on the planet. So I would encourage our listeners to do a little something to make sure that we're reducing the impact of climate change in our communities. Do whatever you can, whether it's, reducing your carbon footprint, whether it's supporting work like ours, you help us to plant more trees, support more communities to grow food sustainably, and they would be able to live in a world that is a lot better than we are right now. So just encouraging everyone who's listening to support our work, but not only our work, but organizations that are doing similar work that we're doing as well, so that we are able to reverse the trend of climate change on our communities, and we're able to help communities become food secure by doing one thing at a time, doing something that makes a difference. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and best wishes in everything that you do. I know, Dr. Benfeld, you would join me in that.
Yes, thank you so much, Taona. It's been a pleasure, and as always, find your work and the conversation very inspiring.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that wraps it up for this episode of For the Soil, a Conversation, which is made possible with funding support from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and the Agua Fund. Other partners include the USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, Virginia Cooperative Extension, Virginia State University, Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation, and partners of the Virginia Soil Health Coalition. Views expressed on this podcast are those of each individual guest. To download a copy of this or any other episode, visit the website forthesoil.org. If you have a specific question about soil health, contact your local extension office, your local USDA service center, or a soil and water conservation district office. Music used during today's program was provided courtesy of the Flip Charts, all rights reserved. For the Soil, a Conversation is produced by On the Farm Radio in collaboration with Virginia Tech. I'm your host, Jeff Ishii.